In 1816, something strange happened to the world. People in New England looked out their windows in July and saw snow falling. Rivers froze, crops withered, and the sun seemed to fade behind a constant gray haze. Farmers stood in their ruined fields, holding frost-bitten corn in disbelief. Birds fell from the sky mid-flight. Across the ocean in Europe, families shivered in their homes, praying for warmth that never came. It would be remembered as the year without a summer, and it all began with a single mountain on the other side of the planet. A year earlier, in April 1815, the people of Sumbawa, a remote island in what is now Indonesia, had been living beneath a restless giant. Mount Tambora had been rumbling for weeks, sending out deep thunder that shook the ground even on nearby islands. The Dutch colonists heard it and thought it was cannon fire from some distant war. On April 10th, the mountain finally exploded. It wasn't just the volcano erupting, it was the loudest sound in recorded history, heard more than 1,200 miles away. The blast sent a column of ash 25 miles high into the sky. Entire villages were vaporized in seconds. Hot ash and gas rolled down the slopes, destroying everything in their path. The explosion was so powerful that the top of the mountain collapsed, leaving behind a vast crater nearly 4 miles wide. For days afterward, the sun disappeared. A thick black rain of ash and pumice fell over hundreds of miles. Ships at sea were trapped in darkness so complete that sailors couldn't see their own decks. Tsunamis roared across nearby islands, and tens of thousands of people died. But Tambora's true impact wouldn't be felt for months until its invisible dust began to drift far beyond Indonesia. High in the stratosphere, the volcano's ash and sulfur dioxide spread like a veil across the globe. The Earth itself became dimmer. When sunlight hit that veil, much of it bounced back into space, cooling the planet by several degrees. The world was about to experience one of the most dramatic climate shifts in human history, and no one had any idea why it was happening. By early 1816, strange things were happening in the skies. In Europe, sunsets turned blood red. The moon appeared blue or green. Painters later captured those fiery skies, unaware they were seeing the afterglow of a distant catastrophe. In North America, the seasons went mad. In May, frost struck the fields of New England. In June, a snowstorm buried parts of Vermont and New York. In July, people scraped ice from their wells. Newspapers reported terrified farmers saying that the world must be ending. Corn and wheat crops failed across the Northeast. The few vegetables that survived were too small to harvest. Horses and cattle died from hunger. Prices for grain and meat skyrocketed, and desperate families began to leave their homes, heading west in search of better land. They traveled in covered wagons toward Ohio, Indiana, and beyond. Historians now say that the year without a summer helped push American settlement westward, shaping the nation's geography in ways no one could have predicted. Europe suffered even more. The Napoleonic Wars had just ended, leaving the continent poor and unstable. Now, with the weather in chaos, famine spread like a plague. Snow fell in June. Crops drowned in endless rain. In Switzerland, people boiled weeds and bark to survive. In Ireland, the potato crops rotted, and hunger drove thousands to emigrate. In France, riots broke out as people looted bakeries. A farmer wrote that he had never seen so dark and cold a year, nor so many weeping children. But in that same year of misery, something extraordinary was born. On the shores of Lake Geneva, a group of young writers had gathered to escape the dreadful weather. The poet Lord Byron rented a villa, called the Villa Diodati, and with him were Percy Bysshe Shelley, his future wife Mary, and their friend John Polidori. They planned to spend the summer boating, hiking, and writing poetry. Instead, endless rain kept them trapped indoors. To pass the time, they told ghost stories by candlelight. One night, Byron challenged them to each invent a frightening tale. In the flicker of that cold, wet summer, Mary Shelley dreamed of a scientist who reanimated the dead. That nightmare became Frankenstein, a story that would shape literature and film for centuries. No one in 1816 understood what had caused the strange weather. Some blamed sunspots, others thought it was divine punishment, or perhaps the end of the world. Science at the time had no tools to connect the distant eruption of Tambora to the freezing fields of Vermont. Only a century later, when scientists studied volcanic ash in polar ice cores, did they realize the truth. The eruption had thrown millions of tons of sulfur into the upper atmosphere, forming tiny droplets that reflected sunlight and cooled the planet. The effects went beyond cold weather. The monsoon cycle in Asia weakened, triggering droughts in India and famine in China. Diseases spread as weakened populations faced food shortages. Some researchers now believe the first great cholera pandemic, which began soon after, was linked to these changes in climate. Yet even in disaster, human creativity found a way forward. In Germany, a shortage of oats to feed horses inspired a man named Karl Dreis to invent a curious wooden machine with 2 wheels and a handlebar. It was the first bicycle. Artists like J.M. Turner painted those eerie sunsets, creating works whose vivid colors were literally shaped by volcanic dust in the air. Farmers learned to plant hardier crops that could survive cooler conditions. Back on Sumbawa, the mountain that caused it all was silent. Its summit was gone, replaced by a yawning crater. The villages that once stood there were buried under ash. When archaeologists explored the site in the 20th century, they found entire settlements preserved like Pompeii, pots still on stoves, skeletons frozen in place. The people had vanished, but their story remained in the gray soil. Over time, the world warmed again. By 1817, the skies were clearing, crops returned, and the memory of the strange cold year began to fade. But its legacy endured. In migration patterns, in art, in science, and in the stories told about how fragile life on Earth can be. Even now, Tambora stands as a quiet warning. Scientists know that another eruption of that scale could alter the climate again, and in a world more connected and dependent than ever, the shock might spread faster than in 1816. For those who lived through it, the year without a summer was something close to the end of the world. It proved that nature can humble humanity in an instant, and that humanity, in turn, can find meaning even in the ashes. So if you ever see the sun set in a strange red glow, or the air take on a coppery tint, remember that once, 2 centuries ago, the sky really did change color. The sun dimmed, the summer vanished, and the world learned just how small we are beneath the shadow of a mountain.